Welcome to Webinar Wednesday here at the beginning of the year. Happy New Year, everybody. We're here today with most of our legislative team to talk about legislative session kickoff. Legislative session for 2023 starts next week, and already we've got some bills pre-filed. We know of some bills that are still going to be filed, and so today we're going to be talking about all of the above. My name is Caitlin Ryan, and I am board president here at the Cannabis Alliance and co-chair of the legislative committee. And I'm just going to go around and have you all introduce yourselves. Burl, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'm Burl Bryson. I'm the executive director of the Cannabis Alliance.
Fantastic. Laura?
Lara Kaminsky. I am the legislative liaison for the Cannabis Alliance.
Thank you. And John?
I'm John Kingsbury. I'm chair of the patient committee, and I also work on the legislative committee.
Perfect. Thank you. And we are unfortunately missing Al Ralston today, and he is still on his holiday travels, but of course he'll be back by next week. He's given us a little bit of information to discuss, but we miss you, Al, and we can't wait to see you again. Here at the Cannabis Alliance, we are dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, equitable, and sustainable cannabis industry. And one of the things that, one of the events of the year that we are always most excited for is our Lobby Day, where we coordinate and organize and bring folks from the cannabis industry to Olympia to be able to talk to legislators. And Jill, who is in our audience, Jill, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about how folks can get involved and sign up for our Lobby Day.
Lobby Day is a lot of fun every year. Whether you are a veteran or you have never been on the Hill before, we've got a space for you. We're going to go ahead and I can put a link in all of our chats so that you can find it, as well as in the description below after the fact. And you just sign up and we'll put you into groups with other people from your districts or similar districts. We give you talking points. We're going to have a reception afterwards and a little bit of a training beforehand. And it's a really great way for you to get involved with your legislators and sit in front of them face to face and talk about the issues that matter to you. So like I said, I'll go ahead and drop it in the chat. You can also always email me, and my email address is just jill.walker@thecannabisalliance.us. I will also put that in the description in all the chats. So if you're interested, please do reach out.
Thank you, Jill. And that actually sort of segues into one of the things I want to talk about first. You'll notice the last 2 years we've had lobby days that have been virtual, just because of the nature of virtual meetings. It's hard to kind of put it all in one day. So we stretched it out over 2 days, and now we're back to one single lobby day because we are going to be lobbying in person this year again. I know 2022 was sort of marked as that transition year, which was kind of messy and challenging, and I'm kind of curious what you all think is going to happen. I know we've already done quite a few virtual meetings. We've got a couple of in-person meetings on the books. John, you've already been to a work session in Olympia. How do you think the in-person virtual hybrid's going to go this upcoming session?
How do I think it'll go? I think it'll go fine. So an advantage of virtual meetings is it lets more people participate. And I think that's good. Some people really like the face-to-face. I prefer the face-to-face, but my proximity to the Capitol makes that. I think there's no substitute for that one-on-one human connection, but that's not possible for everybody. And scheduling being what it is, virtual is convenient. So I think it's good. I hope that that is a system that is retained for however long.
Yeah, Laura.
I was just going to concur. I mean, I've been an advocate of the virtual participation since it became available. We were able to, in the past couple sessions, get some testimony from folks that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. For example, on our excise tax bill for the removal of the excise tax for patients that are on the registry for DOH compliant products, we found a patient that is perfect in terms of telling her story, but incapable of traveling all the way to Olympia to give that testimony in person. So making sure that that's still available is hugely important. But at the same time, I know that Al, our lobbyist, really struggled with getting some of the information that he was able to get when he was able to walk the halls and just run into somebody and just catch their ear for a minute or two and just be able to get a lot of clarity that way. So I know he's really looking forward to being able to do that again and actually lobby the way lobbying originally started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my hope is that this is going to be a little bit of the best of both worlds, where we'll be able to be more inclusive while also now having those opportunities to be in person and meet in the cafeteria and things like that. Chat up legislative assistants, all of those good features of being in person again. So as I started out saying, we do now already have some pre-filed bills on the books. And I thought we'd start talking about those first, and then we'll fill in some of the legislation that the Cannabis Alliance is working on, and then some of the legislation that we know is coming from other organizations and other places moving forward in this legislative session. So Laura, which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, I'll just start out by saying that there are 4 as of today that have been pre-filed for our industry. One is from the LCB, which we've been knowing was going to get filed on the cannabis social equity components. So that one's been pre-filed and is available. It's Senate Bill 5080. I wonder if I can put these links in the chat. Can I do that for people? Is that just for us, or how does that work?
That is just for us, but you know what? I will, Jill can put it in on social media. I'll send her a link to the bill tracker with all of those in there. And
okay, great. Yeah, so just so if people want to go take a look at the actual legislation themselves, those links will take you to the Washington State Legislature page that gives bill status at a glance, which is super helpful. It shows you who the prime sponsor is, all of the other sponsors that sign on. This one in particular only has a prime sponsor at this point. I'm sure that that will change. It's Saldana. And then, as the session moves forward, you'll start seeing the bill as it moves forward in the process. So because it's a Senate bill, it'll start in the Senate, then it'll go to the House. If it passes the Senate, if it passes the House, they'll just make sure that if any changes have happened, sorry, I'm giving a little tutorial.
No, that's perfect, actually. And
okay.
we can slow it down. And
okay.
Yeah,
I
let's
like
do that tutorial because especially if it's legislation that you in particular are very interested in, following this process is not as easy as just hopping on the website and intuitively finding the links, but this tool is there. And once you kind of get it set up, it's extremely helpful. So why don't you go ahead and start at the beginning again?
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is the legislative website. You can access it by going to leg.wa.gov. And when you go there, that's the home page for the Washington State Legislature. On the, either on the left or on the very right, you'll see some buttons that are either for bill information, that's on the left. On the right, you'll see a button under Find for Bills. Either one of them takes you to the same page where you can search by bill number. And this is where it gets really helpful to know what bill numbers are. If it starts in the 5,000s, it's a Senate bill. If it starts in the 1,000s, it's a House bill. But you would just pop that number in to this search by bill number area. So if I do that for this one, 5080.
How would you feel about sharing your screen?
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Sure. All right, let's do this.
While she's searching, can I mention something quickly?
Absolutely.
There is an office in the legislature, which you can also called Legislative Support Services. And they are mostly staffed by people who've been there forever, and they're amazing. They've taught me how to follow processes, see who voted on what, do basic things to complicated things. So keep that in the top of your head. Legislative Support Services is a resource that's really amazing. And if you're in the Capitol, it's in the basement.
Great. Okay, so can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so just kind of going back to the beginning, here's the homepage for ledge.wa.gov. Over here, you'll see bill information. You can click that, or you can go down here to bills and click that. It takes you to this basic page where you can find pre-filed bills, and that will take you to every single bill that's been pre-filed at this point, probably a little bit too much information. Or you can search for a specific bill number here, and it'll take you to this page. And this is the page I was talking about earlier, which just kind of gives you the bill status at a glance. You'll see the bill number SB means Senate bill. The 5,000 number also lets you know it's a Senate bill. This gives you the title of the bill right here, expanding and improving the social equity in cannabis program. We know that this is being put forward by the LCB. It doesn't necessarily tell you that anywhere on this page or anywhere in the bill.
Just below Saldana by request, liquor and cannabis.
I'm sorry. On this one, it does, because it's requested by the state. If it was a industry group or something like that, it's not necessarily going to say that information. The sponsor right now is Saldana. Like I mentioned, this will start getting filled out with additional names as more people sign on. And then this right here is the section that'll just kind of tell you where it is in the process, just at a glance. So the Senate is first on the top because it is a Senate bill. Then it will go to the House. Then ideally, if it all goes through all the processes, then it will start going through after passage stuff in terms of, the governor's going to sign it, things like that. You go down a little bit more, and this will just continue to fill out as the bill moves through session, talking about when it's scheduled for a hearing, when it's scheduled for executive session. All those kinds of informations are going to be in here. This will also, available documents will also start filling out. Right now, it's only got the original bill. Most bills don't stay in their original form through session. So you'll start seeing, amended versions, and you'll start seeing, all those amendments and things like that. If a fiscal note is requested on the legislation, you'll start seeing those things here, as well as amendments. And then this is my favorite part sometimes, the available videos. This is TVW. They will be recording the hearings. Anything that's public, they will be there and they'll be recording it. And it's fantastic to be able to go back and reference some of these hearings to see what somebody may have said that you agree or don't agree with, and be able to reference it. So this is great information. If you click on the original bill, it'll take you to that actual legislation, which can be very dense for some people to read through. But if you want to give it a go and you have any questions, that's kind of why we're here, is to help answer some of those questions. So try not to be too afraid, dig in, see what it feels like, ask questions if you have them.
Yeah.
Very quick tutorial.
Awesome. No, thank you, Laura. That was fantastic. The only other thing I want to point out is on that page to the right at the very top, there is a get email notifications button. Yep, right there, that you can just, it's very easy, click on that, pop your email in there, and that will give you the opportunity to be updated as things happen to the bill and move forward, if you don't want to have to remember to come back and check the website. And I'm realizing we're not going to be able to do one of these before the deadline for committees again. So Laura, if you wouldn't mind, since you've got it up, can you go to legislative committees? Well, gosh, they probably don't have it set up just yet, but this would be your portal for looking for your opportunity to testify if you're going to do that. And while we may not be able to have another webinar Wednesday before this, we already have a pretty good written out version. So now that I'm talking about it, we can we'll visit that there again. But you'll see there, please check back on Monday, January 9th, 2023 for committee information. What they still have up there is last biennium's information. And so we'll get all the new stuff. But one of the things I wanted to talk about that you won't be able to see on the website here just yet, but that is we do at least have the new committee names. And I think we could probably close this out, Laura.
Okay, the only thing that I wanted to mention here is the title of this particular committee has changed. It used to be the House Commerce and Gaming Committee. That's where all of the cannabis bills would go through. Now it has been changed to House Regulated Substances and Gaming Committee. So name change, but essentially all of our bills will be going through this committee.
Yeah. And in that committee, we are going to see Representative Shelley Kloba return as one of the chairs. And then something interesting is happening this time, and it's not even a co-chair, but chair and chair, Representative Wiley is also going to be a chair of that committee. And so it'll be interesting to see the dynamic there and how that works out. We see a couple of new legislators that I believe are going to be on that committee as well. But looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have there this upcoming session. Senator Karen Kaiser is still going to remain chair of, and do we know, is it going to be named, is the committee name the same?
For the Senate, I believe
The
so.
Senate.
Labor and Commerce is usually.
Yeah, it's the same name.
Okay. Great. Yeah. And so those are our two main committees, unless there's a really, really good reason why any one of our cannabis bills shouldn't start in another committee, which is extremely rare. Normally, everything will start in one of those two committees, whether they're introduced in the House or in the Senate. I think last year, maybe we had one start in finance and another possibly start in law and justice.
Arrest protection went to public safety, I think.
Went to public safety. Okay. All right. So thank you again, Laura, for showing us all how to do that and navigate the website. And then if you wouldn't mind, now let's talk about some of the pre-files. So we had started with the equity in cannabis bill from agency request from LCB. And I can say this bill did reflect a good amount of information that would, a lot of the recommendations from the Social Equity and Cannabis Task Force. Some of the things didn't quite align and were more representative of the mechanics that LCB would like to see in place. We've had the opportunity to submit some adjustment to the bill from the first draft that we saw back in August. I have an expectation that there will be some robust conversation around this bill. What do you all think?
Based on how some of the conversations have gone prior to this, yes, I believe that we will see some robust conversation, very animated hearings, I'm sure. It's a very charged topic for good reason. And, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I think that yeah, we will see what happens. But now that the bill has officially been pre-filed, this is where the conversation will start. So for those that are interested in getting involved in the conversation, I've pulled up our bill tracker for the Cannabis Alliance here. You'll see the one that we're talking about here is the driver of this legislation is the LCB. It's SB 5080. If you click on that, it'll take you to the actual bill page where I showed you all that information before, and then the legislation, you can pop up there too. But so go ahead and read it. If you have questions about it, reach out to us, but there will be scheduled a hearing on this for sure. And those that are interested in giving public testimony can do so at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the major tension here is going to be, does this bill go far enough to right the wrongs that have been you know, put out in our industry, particularly here in Washington State, since we did not have any equity component to this at the beginning, versus how far can the industry stretch in order to do that. And all conversation is a good one. And so looking forward to that discussion for sure. Let's go ahead and let's talk about interstate commerce. So this is a bill, I know we've attributed it here to WACA, but it's something that we've also been working on for quite some time. I know it came out of collaborative efforts and collaborative conversation between the Cannabis Alliance and Washington Cannabis Business Association. And we've had lots of great discussions. A gentleman named Adam Smith out of Oregon who helped get the Oregon bill passed. And then also California just ratified theirs as well this last summer. And that was all Adam's work. Came to our summit, which was great, and talked a little bit about it. This bill is if you want to start reading a bill, this one's the one to start with. It's a page and a half. And basically it says, when it is time, Washington can engage in interstate commerce. And then what I like about this bill is it gets into what when it is time means. So one of the things that we do know is potentially coming. Everybody's always sort of waiting for the federal government to see what's happening. We know that there's comprehensive reform written. That's a possibility. The Booker-Schumer Act. We know of quite a bit of comprehensive reform, or sorry, incremental reform, things like safe banking and other things like that, as well as Biden's request to examine where cannabis falls on the controlled substances list, right? So there are a variety of ways federalization could happen. And so this bill says, you know, the trigger's here, but there's also a list of other options. One of those might be a ruling from the Department of Justice, which again, Adam Smith, sensiblemarkets.org, if you're interested in checking out what that project is about. And that's about asking the federal government, do you think that it is any more illegal for adult use states to engage in trade contracts with one another than it is for businesses within a state to engage in commerce with one another? And the hope here is that if we have the opportunity to ask that question of the Department of Justice, they would simply have to say that no, as far as the federal government is concerned, intrastate and interstate are just about the same amount of illegal. And then that would leave it up to governors to decide whether or not they want to start having contracts with one another. It is something that I know our producer processors, especially here in a producer state, would really love the opportunity to share our excellent Washington bud with other states. But this bill also has something else in there. Laura, do you want to talk about, there's more than just producers?
Yeah, so in this bill, it says also that, sorry, I'm just going here in here. It's not only producers and processors, but also researchers or retailers licensed with the state here can deliver cannabis to a person located in another authorized state or receive cannabis. So that's a little bit different, allowing researchers and retailers. Most of the legislation that we know of has just been for the farmers, although some of those states, you know, like California, they have distribution centers and whatnot. So it does work slightly differently there, but to specifically include retailers and researchers is new.
Yeah. So this is a bill, like I said, that we've been working on as well. And so something we would be in support of. Pearl, can you talk a little bit about the conversation around this? Why do you think this would be a good idea for our state?
So ultimately, Washington should be a net exporter of cannabis. We've got a robust historical cannabis industry in this state. The West Coast is the best coast, as they say. And Washington has been a net exporter of cannabis in the previous market as well. And so there's no reason that we shouldn't continue to lead like we do with apples and other agricultural crops. Our cannabis should be able to be sent to all of the other states. There's lots of other states, and particularly in the East Coast, that have huge population bases, but no background and historical ability to produce the high quality cannabis that we produce here in Washington. And it's going to take them a long time to come up to speed if they ever can. And they probably are not going to be able to produce it as economically as we're able to produce it here in Washington. So Washington should again be a net exporter, and ultimately this bill will allow for, once the triggering event happens, will allow for Washington to lead the nation as one of the top cannabis producing states.
Now, I'm going to ask a scary question because we have not really discussed this, but I'm kind of curious and I'm going to do it anyways. But with including retail in there, in this particular one, is there any concern that this is an invitation for companies like Amazon, for example, to start getting involved in the retail side of things before federal legalization, or without federal, are large corporations not hopping in yet?
Well, I think first of all, I think this particular bill specifies that it needs to be licensed, a licensed retailer. So that would make Amazon have to go through the LCB and get a license, I guess. So I don't, I'm not sure how all that would work. So I think for now, given the parameters, it's probably unlikely. But I do, it does raise the question of, what other avenues does that open up by involving retailers? Does it make it so our Washington state retailers are only going to stock their shelves with California product? What does that mean for our farmers here in our state? I think that it's an open-ended question we don't necessarily have the answer to.
Yeah. Well, and like you have pointed out, bills never end the way that they start. And that's actually what legislative session is about, is getting as many eyes on the law as we possibly can to make it as streamlined and effective a law as it can possibly be by the end. So I'm sure these will be all part of discussion as this one moves through. I remember Adam saying at one point, though, that this is a great bill because for legislators, it doesn't cost any money and it doesn't go into effect right away. So they're not having to put their name on something that's too risky, but we could see lots of potential benefit for our industry in the future.
Well, and I do also want to say that I feel like, and I would hope that this is an easy one for our legislature and our governor, seeing as how there's 2 other competing states that have already done this. So if we as Washington want to stay in the forefront, we need to get on board with this as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We're the last one on the Western coast to not have a bill like this. Okay, looking at additional pre-file bills, we've already had some good discussion around creating contracts. Beryl, do you want to talk a little bit about this bill, what it looks like, and maybe some of the compromise that we might hope to see?
Yeah, you're talking about 1083?
Yes.
Yeah. So this bill, and I may not be the best person to speak about this bill. It's allowing for contracts between cannabis producers and retailers. And so it really allows for an extension of the payment date between a producer processor license and a retailer license. So currently what's required right now is that immediate payment is made at the time of the transaction. So a producer processor, when they drop off a delivery to a retail licensee, should receive payment at that time, either in cash or by check. And so this has potentially raised problems in the past if there's a slight change on the manifest as that product is going to the retailer, or other variation, additional things added to the manifest, the person that is authorized to make payment or write the check is not available at that time. So it's been a bit of a gray area for a while, and there has been delay in payment, which is not theoretically allowed by statute. So this is sort of codifying this gray area and allowing for basically late payments. But this has also extended it out to, and sort of in the past, the gray area has been, kind of up to 7 days has been sort of considered a immediate payment. But this is extending it out to 15 full calendar days after the date that the product is delivered by the retailer or to the retailer. And so this really is, allowing for net terms. And net terms in sort of a business environment is typical. What we often see in many industries is a net 15 or net 30, meaning that, 15 or 30 days after the product is received, then that retailer can pay for it. And so that's really what this bill has done, is allowed for a net 15 terms. Therefore, the producer processor is effectively fronting that product to the retailer for 15 days. and after which then the retailer can pay for it. So the retailer really has an opportunity to book that product into inventory, to get it on the shelves, to sell it, to collect payment for it, and then ultimately have no sort of carrying costs in that system, and then can ultimately pay out the producer processor at the end of that time.
Yeah, I think some of the concerns with that, obviously beneficial on the retail side of things, that on the producer processor side of things, that can be really challenging, especially if you're a medium-sized or smaller producer processor, that that not having that payment on delivery is can be a real challenge to making the budget work, especially when we're in a moment of the slimmest margins for producer processors in the history of adult use. John, I see your hand.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh,
So the last two bills, I want to make a high level comment on this. So the last two bills sound kind of mundane, right? You know, terms, interstate commerce, and they sound kind of dry, but they're actually, in my view, sort of exciting, because what they represent is the normalization of cannabis commerce, which really I think is a great marker for how decriminalization has come. You know, it's actually sort of going into the ordinary sort of banal realm, and that represents normalization. And I think that's kind of exciting, ironically. So that's my little high level comment.
I love that observation. Yeah, Laura.
Well, and if I may, I'm going to do another brief tutorial.
Yes.
Since we've got this bill here too. It's really short. So it's a really good one to show how to read a bill. So here you've got the number, like I said, because it's in the thousands, it's a House bill. You see who is on the bill as sponsors. The very first name is the prime sponsor. And then it goes into the actual bill. This is what I want to point out. So here in section 1, you'll see that this section is actually just amending current law. And it says here that it's being amended. Okay, so everything that's here that is just in normal text is already in state law. The thing that changes or is being changed is what is underlined here. So this is what they're asking to add to state law. If there was anything that was crossed out, that would be what they're asking to remove. So this is how you read a bill. When you see it just in normal text like this is current law. What is being changed is what is underlined or crossed out. And so this is the information here that within context of current law, you would read this bill and say, okay, this is what they're asking to change. How do I feel about these particular things within the context of current law? So hopefully that made a little bit of sense. And you'll see that it's very short. It's 1.5 pages. So just wanted to do that tutorial.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know when we were talking about it before, I was like, yeah, just look for the lines and that'll tell you what's going on. Thanks, Laura. So let's loop back around. Burl, you were about to make a comment following my statement around the challenges that producer processors might have with this.
Well, for sure. I think producer processors are facing unprecedented challenges right now. That the cost of production has gone up with a lot of the challenges in the supply chain and inflation. You know, everybody's been seeing rising costs at the grocery store and other places. It's no different for producer processors, and it's very difficult to get a lot of the needs out of the supply chain. You know, manufacturers that previously had lots of product available all of a sudden are out of things like cones for rolling joints and cartridges for vape pens and packaging and materials that go into packaging. So it's been a super challenging time with rising costs. And you know, on the other side of things, we've seen an unprecedented reduction in the wholesale cost of cannabis. So we've seen plummeting prices in every aspect, in extracts, in cannabis, in bulk cannabis, in edibles. You know, everything has been dropping in prices. So the producer processors are really getting squeezed, and our margins become so low that having to carry those costs for an additional 2+ weeks before those checks can be deposited, when people have payrolls to make and other things, is a significant additional burden on producer processors when they're being squeezed from all sides already.
Yeah. I think some of the compromise that is already being discussed is rather than 15 days, 5 days. That allows for just some of the things that happen in general about payment transfers, for those things to be still in the realm of legal. Whereas right now, as you had pointed out at the very beginning of this discussion, Burl, stuff happens. And right now, if stuff happens, then you are outside the law, and that can be not an awesome place to be. So 5 days allows for that wiggle room for things to just happen without setting up exactly something like terms that can really spell some disaster for some producer processors.
And this is a great opportunity for people to actually comment to the legislature and make their feelings about this known. It is an opportunity to amend the language of this bill before it becomes law. And so before it's codified net terms for all retailers at 15 days, people can log on and comment and let their representatives know that this would have a big impact on their businesses, and that while immediate payment doesn't make sense given the actual climate of the way business is conducted, sort of codifying a net 15 for all retailers doesn't make sense either. And that some reasonable time period, like 5 days, hey, that's time to check the inventory, make sure that everything that was supposed to be, on that manifest was actually delivered, and then put a check in the mail and mail that check to anywhere in the state. That's 5 days is certainly enough time to accomplish all of those things without building in sort of an extra giveaway to the retail community.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Burl. Let's see, did we cover all of the pre-files?
No, there's still one more. This one is Senate Bill 5123. And it's regarding cannabis employment, and it's being put forth by Senator Kaiser. This is, I believe, something very similar to what she's attempted to do in the past, which is essentially make it so that people can't have currently it's very difficult for people who are legally consuming cannabis to become employed. And so the idea is that you cannot discriminate against someone because of their cannabis use when it comes to employment. And I know that Kaiser's been really interested in this topic from just a, equity in employment issue. But she has come into challenges from industries such as trucking and some other like labor, like manual labor that requires elements of safety, right? So there's this concern between, if somebody consumes cannabis, will they be safe on the job? So that's the thing that's been kind of tripping up this legislation in the past, but she's putting it forth again, which means that the conversation is still happening. And generally, we are in support. I'm going to be super honest that I have not read through it in its entirety. It is also very short, 2 pages, and it would all be new law. So this is not amending any current laws. It's creating a new law.
Yeah, and this, by the way, I just learned that the United States is unique in its drug testing requirements. So Canada and other states do not do the same level of drug testing as a requirement for employment. There can be testing if you are suspected of being impaired while on the job, of course, which I personally believe is sort of where we need to be, if you've got a problem, and then that needs to be addressed at that time. But simply as a screener for qualifying for employment is profoundly discriminatory, and basically an invasion of privacy. And ultimately what we run into that's a real struggle with cannabis is that we don't have a way, I believe it's right per se, we don't have a way to assess impairment in the immediate time, the way we do with blood alcohol, right? We can test somebody's blood alcohol and then we know what that level of impairment is. That does not exist for cannabis. We have some opportunities, we've worked with the Druid app developers, but right now, Washington State, it's 0.5 nanograms. Is that correct? Am I getting that right? Yeah. That requires, so for example, if you get pulled over and you're suspected of being impaired by cannabis, they have to call a phlebotomist out to your car. So you sit there and wait until a phlebotomist can come and draw your blood, and then they analyze it. And you could certainly be positive for that had you had cannabis 2 days prior. Even. So certainly no longer impaired while you're driving that vehicle, but by state law would be considered driving while impaired. Yeah, Laura.
So I just really quickly scanned this legislation. It's very interesting. So it is very specifically talking about the drug testing paradigm and how difficult that is, and says that you cannot discriminate based on a positive drug test because of the way cannabis stays in the system. But what is interesting is in the second section, it basically says that this law does not apply to an applicant in the building and construction trades. So that's the acquiesce to some of that pushback from previous attempts, as well as those that are applying for positions in the federal government. So it's interesting, some of the concessions that this bill seems to be giving in order to get it across the finish line. So interesting one. I recommend people read it.
So,
yeah, and it'll be interesting to see who turns out to testify. Last year when this bill was up, it was primarily folks in construction who had shown up to say, this is just not safe. We need to be able to test. And now with this little carve out, I wonder if they'll still show up to have a conversation about it, or if they'll stay away knowing that this bill does not apply to them. John, I saw your hand go up for a second.
there's two things that occur to me here, and this has come up every year that I can think about. So a lot of this is driven by the insurance industry. So a lot of the insurance contracts are what is driving this prohibition, even if an employer doesn't particularly care. This is behind them. And then the other thing that I know I've had discussions with legislators about is that for cannabis patients, we notoriously maintain really high levels. Now our tolerances tend to be high because of that. So in that sense, it is extremely discriminatory and really a hindrance to people that require or rely on cannabis as a medication to function, even though, again, as Laura said, it's not necessarily impairing at all. So it is important to say the legislature can't just necessarily say, you can't use this if there's an insurance company behind that business saying, well, yeah, you can't use that, but we won't write a policy. There's that tension there that's sort of tricky to overcome. So
yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because yeah, this does get a little bit complicated. There are other states that have passed laws like this, and they're sort of figuring it out. So I know that there's a pathway available to us, but it'll be interesting to see how the conversation goes this upcoming year. Let's go ahead and talk about the legislation that we are going to be putting forward. I think this is a good transition to talk in particular about our two patient bills, starting with removing the excise tax for patients who are on the registry purchasing DOH compliant product. The last two sessions, this bill has made it out of the Senate and over to the House. It gained more support in the Senate from 2020 to 2021. Oh, wait, no, we're in 2023 now. From 2021 to 2022. And so what happened with this bill is that Senator Kaiser was our sponsor, and she basically has said, all right, House of Representatives, get your act together. So we are going to be starting that bill in the House. And it got lots of support in the House, sailed through it just last year, made it all the way to rules, and just did not get pulled to the floor for a vote. And so we expect once we get this one started, it'll go very quickly through both the House and the Senate. And we expect this one to be a win this year. it's been a fun bill to work on. I put fun in air quotes, because of the fiscal note, and then also some regulations are changing. Laura, that was my summary. You put a lot of hard work and have some very great stories to tell about this bill. Anything you want to add on that one?
No, other than I hope we don't have to go through the same thing regarding a fiscal note again this year. Since we're starting a new biennium, we get the whole new thing starts all over again. So the LCB will need to write a fiscal note. I have all those emails previously that I can just forward to them around, how the fiscal note should be very, very low. The reason for that is that the subset of people that would receive this excise tax removal is so tiny, as well as the types of products that it would be on is also very tiny. So there is very little impact to the state when it comes to loss of tax dollars. So let's just hope that we get a good fiscal note out of the gate and we don't have to go through that process. That would be lovely.
We've seen a multi-million-dollar swing in the fiscal note.
Yes. Yeah. It was pretty remarkable. I mean, it's what they call budget dust, is what the state would lose. And in fact, we would make the argument that you actually might see more just sales in general, because people who are currently not accessing the regulated system would actually come in and start utilizing it. So sales in general, we think would actually increase. We just think it's a good bill. It's a fair bill. We need to not tax our patients for their medicine, especially at almost 40%. It just is wrong. We need to get this one through. So we hope we see everybody coming out in support and signing in favor. When they do those roll calls of who signed in, not wishing to testify, you don't have to say anything. Just say, I support this legislation. If it's multi-pages long, that really goes a long way. So we'll be asking for you guys to do that.
Well, and in addition to that, it's been interesting working on this bill now for a couple of years, again, gaining more and more coalition of support behind it, because it is just an important, good bill. However, it is now becoming a bill that is almost necessary to save our medical system. John, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing? We, by the way, will have an entire webinar Wednesday discussing this topic in greater detail. But just as a flyover, John, why is this bill in particular so important for the medical system in Washington State?
So I have been doing an audit of the list of medically endorsed stores. And what I've been finding is that there's a lot of stores on that list, but there are very few stores actually meeting the requirements. And so my bar is, I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but my bar is, it is a requirement for that a store be able to enter patients into the DOH database. Now that is voluntary, but what I've been seeing is that's collapsing. And I won't go into all the reasons why this is. Why that makes me, I don't choose to register. I don't make judgments about people who do or stores that choose to participate. But what really makes me fearful about this trend is that patients have such a tenuous legal protections as it is now. For patients who choose to join the registry, what little legal protections they have are often tied to their registration, and the system is literally disappearing. There are parts of the state right now where you simply can't register even if you choose to. And so if you want to grow a few plants and you want to grow enough plants, I've had people say, you're going to have to drive all the way to Spokane, or you're going to have to drive all the way to Yakima or something. And so literally what I'm witnessing in this audit is the collapse of the medical system, and with it, the legal protection of patients. So that's why this really matters. I believe that the only way to save this system at this point, besides auditing the system, is through an excise tax exemption. Give patients a strong incentive to participate. And the purpose to have an excise tax exemption is not just to save the registry and with it the legal protections. but also to engage patients with the regulated system. So, if patients come in and they're not paying their 37%, what they are doing is they're paying producers and retailers and regulators. They're adding to their income. There's a tremendous amount of activity that I see still outside of the regulated market, which is sort of nuts, 7 years past 50/52, because going to a store is convenient, right? You got lots of choices on the shelf, you got regular hours. Why aren't patients going? And the number one reason is cost. And again, we have the highest excise tax rate in the country.
By a lot.
And to say, and I just think it's folly to say, well, we just don't want to give up those tax dollars, because I see a lot of people who are never paying those tax dollars because they're never going into stores. They're never going to the hardworking producers and processors and retailers in the system. So it not only would, I think, be the only thing that can save the patient registry and the medical system such as it is in this state, but I think it would be millions and millions of dollars every year into the state, into licensees' pockets. And, frankly, they could use that money. So I just think this little thing with this little tiny fiscal note could do so many things all at once. I think it will save our system from collapsing. I think it will get patients engaged in the system. It will preserve our small legal protections by getting people engaged. And I think it'll be a significant cash infusion into the pockets of licensees. And so that's my little pitch for it. But I am terrified at the rate that I'm seeing, that the so-called medical system in this state will collapse by the end of the year. I think I could make a strong mathematical case for that. So it's really, really important that we do this one thing this year in order to do that. So.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I look forward to being able to get into the weeds a little bit deeper on the contributing factors to that and other potential ways that we can shore that up. I do know one of those other potential ways is another piece of legislation that same thing, only in the opposite direction, made it all the way through the House 2 years in a row and over to the Senate, made it into rules and just didn't get called up for a vote. We know that last year, especially in the short session, following all of the, and this is again in the midst of the pandemic and all of the budget issues regarding pandemic things. So we understand that things get busy. However, we expect this one to also move very quickly and successfully moving forward, and that is arrest protection. Right now, patients are afforded only affirmative defense, which means they are guilty until proven innocent rather than innocent until proven guilty. And so since in our state it is illegal, and not just illegal, but a felony to grow plants at home, this is the most common way that we see interaction with law enforcement and patients who are on the registry is around growing plants. A lot of times law enforcement comes in and sees plants and they assume something illegal is happening. The arrest is made, plants are destroyed, people are left to sit in prison or in jail for an overnight potentially, and then come to find out they're growing legally because they're patients, but they have no recourse because again, they're guilty until proven innocent, not the other way around. This again, we feel is really common sense, straightforward legislation that should have been afforded at the beginning, but trying to make it correct. Now, John, do you want to add any more to that?
Well, let me summarize what the bill would do. And I explain this to legislators and they just look at me like, this isn't already the law, because it's such a reasonable idea. It's a very few word changes in the law. It basically says if a patient has contact with law enforcement and they appear to be following the rules, they don't have 50 plants, they're not selling it, that kind of stuff. They go in, law enforcement goes in, looks at my garden, my papers say I can have 4 plants, I have 4 plants there, that I can't be arrested. That's all it says. If you seem to be following the law, you can't be arrested. And that just seems like common sense. Patients do get arrested, and I'll tell you what happens. Law enforcement comes in, they see you've got the right number of plants, and then they say, well, I don't know if this authorization is real, or I'm not sure what the rules are. And they rip their garden up and they throw a patient into the court system who already has profound challenges in their life. They're probably poor as a result of their medical condition. So they get a public defender that just wants to get them off the books. And it's cruel and it's unnecessary and there's no sense in it. And when certain, say, sheriff's departments have the legal leeway to do this to patients without any sort of liability, it creates a cruel recipe for harassing patients and really throwing their lives in an upended way, in a way that doesn't benefit anybody. So basically what the bill does is say, if you're following the rules, you can't be arrested. And it's hard to think of anything more reasonable than that, right?
I was just going to add in that, I recently talked to a legislator about this issue. We're talking to legislators, letting them know what we're going to be doing this next session. And I brought this one up and they said, does that really happen?
And it does.
They're incredulous. They're absolutely incredulous that this happens. And I said, yes.
We get contacted
It
at
really
least
does.
a couple a year, and those are the ones that reach out to us for assistance. So I know it happens at least more than 2 or 3 times a year.
Right.
And it shouldn't ever happen.
It shouldn't.
So
ever.
this should be a no-brainer. And as Caitlin said, because it is sort of a no-brainer, it went through committees and through the House by healthy margins. And then it went over to the Senate. It went through the policy committee by a healthy margin, and then it just sat in rules. And that happened twice. So the legislature is fully behind this. We just need to find a way to get it through Senate rules. That bill will come back. It will have the same language as last year. I was kind of expecting a pre-file, but whatever. I hope
checked
that
before
people
we
will
got
sign.
on. It's not there just yet.
Right. So we had a lot of people sign in previous years. We had one opponent only, and that was Washington's Associations of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And then, 90 people signed on pro. So there's no reason this shouldn't be able to happen. So, it's so critically important to, to the feeling that patients are safe and don't have more unnecessary challenges, that I hope people will stay engaged in this issue. I just think it's extremely important that if we want to decriminalize cannabis, that we decriminalize it for patients as well. So that's my little speech.
Absolutely. Now we have 2 other pieces of legislation to talk about, and keeping in this thread, we've talked a lot about home grow already. Washington State is one of the only adult use states that does not allow for some measure of home grow. And unlike any other state, our penalty is it's a felony to have a plant at home if you are not a patient on the registry with that allowance. John, you've been working on this wholeheartedly since the get-go. So I'll let you take this one as well. We have a new sponsor this time around, and she's putting us through our paces a little bit to make sure this bill is as perfect as it can be. Talk to us about home grow.
So home grow usually is written by October, and we are still finalizing the details today. So I felt really privileged to participate in the social equity work group, part of that related to home grow. One of the things that I discovered through crunching the numbers is that the racial disparity of enforcement of home grow for like 6 plants or fewer is profound. So there will be more emphasis on the social equity part of this. But what we're talking about so far that I can say firmly is we're talking about 6 plants. There will be caps. Previously, there was no caps on holding. That will show up. Representative Kloba wanted to talk about safe storage laws. What we've done in past years is say, what are the objections and can we meet them? And because we just need to bring some skeptics, not everybody, you'll never win everybody, but enough over the fence to say, yeah, this isn't a big deal. Because what we found in other states is that, you know, they've passed home grow law and it's never been a big deal. Growing cannabis well is hard. And I think the fear that, you know, suddenly there's going to be a bunch of people growing at home and they're going to leave stores, it just hasn't borne out. We are an anomaly. I think 17 states allow home grow now, and then Washington, D.C. I know a couple turned this last year, and I think the fear is overblown. But we need to sort of address the concerns that opponents have, and so I think that's what a lot of the haggling is about. So I don't want to give too many details until I see it in writing, because, you know, things change in 2 weeks, but there will definitely be a home grow law or a bill. It should be 6 plants. There will be a cap. The same things that have been in past bills, like your neighbor can't smell it, your neighbor can't see it, which are the same laws for 502 and medical gardens. Those will still be there, and there'll probably be some sort of safe provision or safe storage provisions. And that's my teaser.
Fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic.
But I will say this, Representative Kloba has been a passionate, articulate advocate, and I'm extremely grateful that we have her on our side. So I just need to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's some really clever phrasing about the crucible of genius, or I don't know, but as we are being put through our paces, there is a refinement happening here that I think will serve the bill as it moves through the legislature this session. So, and I will just say thank you, John Kingsbury, for your hard work on this bill as well. And then speaking of growing, we are going to be introducing a Cannabis Research Commission bill. I did check on that one too today, not just yet, but we are going to be, in the past, we have started it in the House. This year, we are starting it in the Senate with newly elected to the Senate, Senator Sharon Shoemake. And Laura, this has been something you have poured a lot of time, effort, heart, and energy into. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about this commission bill?
So essentially what the bill does it would establish a Washington State Cannabis Research Commission, very specifically research. A lot of our agricultural state commissions also involve marketing. We will not have any form of marketing. Cannot state that strongly enough. A lot of times when we put this bill forward, that is the number one thing that our opponents get worried about, is all of a sudden we're going to be saying everybody buy cannabis, doesn't matter how old you are or where you live. Not going to happen. So this is specifically for research. Our industry desperately needs dedicated dollars for agricultural research. What good and safe methods of pesticide application can be. How can you even avoid having to get to that stage? We really need our farmers to get some support when it comes to worker safety and standards. We are often overlooked, and also the agencies that are typically charged with giving this type of education or research don't get dollars for our industry, so they don't do it for our industry. And so we're kind of left out in the cold, except for those few large producers that can do the research on their own because they're doing quite well. That information then becomes proprietary, and if anybody else wants it, they'll have to buy it. That's not how commissions work. Commissions, the research information is available to every single farmer in the state. So it is extremely valuable. The other thing that commissions do is, even without that marketing element, it really starts to raise the quality and viability of the industry for Washington. So when a bill like the Interstate Commerce Bill happens and we can send our products to other states, our products from Washington are going to be sought after because of the quality that our products can fetch. So really important bill. What else was I going to say about it? Oh, certain things. So yeah, Senator Shoemake now will be the one that's forwarding this. So it's exciting that it's going to be starting in the Senate. We've had the conversation quite a lot in the House, but not as many senators have heard about this legislation. So that'll be good. I don't know, what else can I say? I feel like I've talked so much about it that I might be skipping over all kinds of details.
No, that's great. And I just want to point out, for example, one of the first federal grants has been given here in Washington State to University of Washington Professor Christopher Simpson, who is looking at worker safety and allergens and inhalants. And especially there was a death of a worker in Massachusetts fairly recently. And so looking at workplace safety, we're lucky that we have somebody like Dr. Simpson who wants to look at this and sees our industry as every other industry that requires this kind of investigation. And then with the purposes of them providing recommendations for what safe practice is. But without just his desire to study this, we wouldn't have the information that he has already been able to give and that we can expect to see from this. And that's where things like the Research Commission, in addition, just at the beginning of this week, full pesticide testing is now in full effect here in Washington State for the first time ever. And so looking at things like safe pesticide application and unique to cannabis, we hold a pesticide workshop every so often. And when we have folks from outside the cannabis industry come talk to us about pesticide application, they are blown away with how complex cannabis uniquely is to the other crops that they talk about. And that's also where a Cannabis Research Commission can participate, Laura.
Yeah, and one caveat to this. So all this research would be driven by industry. So the commission is led by industry members that are voted in by their representatives of their communities, and the research dollars that are allocated for the commission then get to the industry decides what is the most pressing issue that they want to know about. So, if like, for example, in, the berry industry, all of a sudden they get a brand new pest that shows up on their trees and they don't know what to do about it. It's going to destroy everybody's crop. That becomes top of list to start researching. It is up to the industry to decide that, which gives the industry a lot of power in trying to get ahead of any really devastating potential problems. So it's an important element.
One of the concerns that we hear as we've had this discussion quite a bit over the years is the concern about the cost, that this is an additional tax on, in particular, we've already talked about the narrow margins for producers and processors. This is for producers. What's our answer to that question about the specific cost of a research commission?
It is less than a penny for every dollar sold, I believe. It is such an incredibly low amount that would actually be paid by each producer, and it's only on product that is actually sold. So this is not money that you would be paying towards the commission in the hopes that you're going to sell your product. No, you've actually received these dollars already, and a very tiny percentage goes into the commission. With all of the producers paying, that becomes a bucket of money that then can be utilized. It is much cheaper, much more effective than attempting to do it on your own, which most of them cannot do. And when we were looking at how does our assessment rate compare to assessment rates for other commissions in the state, I mean, it's ridiculous how low it is. We actually have other commissioners coming to us and saying, are you sure you don't want it higher? And we say, yes, actually, we would like to start here. So
yeah,
we have to be really cognizant of, sorry, I just wanted to jump in. Yeah, we have to be really cognizant of, costs right now in production of cannabis, and, kind of bring this up again, but producer processors right now are fighting for their lives to keep their heads above water, pay their staff, pay for their incoming materials, pay the power bill and the water bill, which are typically huge in the production of cannabis. So there's a lot of costs out there, and the idea of adding a voluntary additional cost is pretty frightening to a lot of producer processors out there. But like Laura said, this is a tiny amount, and not only is it less than a penny a dollar. I think we ran some preliminary numbers, and it looked like if you were selling about $50,000 a month, this would be about $250 a month. So a very small fraction, and even even a smaller fraction than most producer processors realize. And the ultimate benefit of pooling that money together and having that researchability is pretty phenomenal. So even though there may be a little bit of, oh, what, I have to pay an additional cost, the actual value for that cost is substantial. And so, it's very worthy for producer processors to look at this and go, oh, okay, this is going to make my life better. This is actually going to probably reduce a lot of my incoming costs and make my production cheaper. And it's going to far outweigh the nominal cost a month that I'd have to pay to have this research commission available.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I am going to have to wrap us up here. Unfortunately, there is more legislation to talk about. I would like to call your, of course, that's not going to come up fast enough. I'd like to call your attention to the fact that through the legislative session, most of our webinar Wednesdays are going to be talking about legislative issues. The first one up is going to be, we are going to talk about the collapse of the medical system here in Washington State as sort of a way to set up some of this legislation. And then we'll move into the Research Commission. We are also going to be talking about the expected limit on THC potency that we're going to see in the legislature. We'll have a full webinar on that, as well as equity. This right now, I'd like to plug our Lobby Day. You can check out the link in our chat, and then in all of the platforms that we're currently streaming on, as well as just to highlight, we have our equity policy grant available. We are currently taking applications, and this is to reflect the need for the ongoing work around equity in the cannabis space here in Washington State. You can take a look at those requirements, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or interest in that grant. Moving forward, here at the Cannabis Alliance, we are dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, equitable, and sustainable cannabis industry. John, Burl, Laura, thank you very, very much for the discussion today. I'm excited for session to get started. Let's do some good work.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Caitlin.
Yeah, thanks everyone.